Here we go again.
You can come in, come on in. My proudest legacy will be that of peacemaker.
Peacemaker in the fire. Beautiful.
When the Melania Trump documentary was in development, producers made a request to use Prince's music in the film. It was a simple ask on its surface. Use Prince's songs to underscore key moments in the narrative, to add emotional weight, to enhance the documentary with the power of his artistry. Music that would reach millions of people through the film's distribution channels. Music that would benefit the film's emotional impact and commercial appeal and critical reception. But the response from Prince's estate was immediate and unequivocal. Absolutely not. Prince would never want his songs associated with Donald Trump. That was the answer. No negotiation. No alternative offer. Just a firm no. And that answer tells us everything we need to know about who Prince was and what he believed in his core as an artist and as a person. This moment is fascinating because it crystallizes something essential about Prince's approach to his own art and legacy. Prince wasn't just a musician in the conventional sense of someone who writes songs and records albums. He was someone who believed deeply in the autonomy of his work, in his ownership of his creations, in his right to determine how those creations moved through the world and the cultural contexts in which they appeared. He believed that his music belonged to him, and that how it was used in the world mattered profoundly. He believed that letting his songs be used in certain contexts would compromise something fundamental about who he was and what his art represented. Prince had principles, and he wasn't willing to compromise them for commercial opportunity or for the sake of being agreeable to powerful people. Prince was uncompromising in his values. Let's go back in time for a moment to understand where this came from, to understand the roots of Prince's fierce protective stance toward his work throughout his career. During Prince's lifetime, this wasn't theoretical philosophy discussed in interviews. He lived out these principles in dramatic, confrontational ways that shocked the music industry. When Warner Brothers tried to control his output, to dictate what he could release and when and how, Prince fought back with the intensity of someone willing to sacrifice everything. He didn't acquiesce to corporate demands. He didn't compromise his vision for the sake of commercial success or broad appeal. He took on one of the biggest record labels in the world and won, which was almost unheard of for any artist. He changed his name to a symbol because he wanted to make a point about ownership and control, about the fact that the name Prince belonged to Warner Brothers according to his contract. He wrote "slave" on his face to make his feelings about his contract crystal clear to everyone who saw him. He was willing to sacrifice commercial opportunity to maintain artistic control. This wasn't performance art. This was genuine principle translated into action. This was an artist willing to accept financial loss to maintain his values. Prince was not backing down. Prince also fought against streaming services years before that was a common position among major artists with leverage. When Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube were trying to establish themselves as the primary way people consume music, Prince said no. He pulled his music from these platforms because he believed they undervalued artists and underpaid them systematically. He wasn't interested in the pittance that streaming services paid per play, sometimes less than a fraction of a cent per listen. He wanted artists to be compensated fairly for their work, and he was willing to lose access to massive audiences to make that point. This was radical. This was principled. This was Prince saying, "I don't care if I disappear from these platforms, because my principles matter more than your convenience as consumers." Prince sued YouTube when they wouldn't respect his copyright and his ownership of his material. Prince sued fans who were trying to share his music online in acts they thought were celebratory. When people tried to celebrate him by posting clips of his performances, Prince's legal team came down hard. Not because he was greedy or vindictive in a personal way, but because he had drawn a line in the sand about ownership and control. His music belonged to him. Not to YouTube, not to the platforms, not to the internet culture that wanted to repurpose it and remix it and use it freely. This was his life's work, and he was going to protect it with everything he had. Every legal tool available to him. This is crucial context for understanding the Melania documentary decision and what it reveals about Prince's values as an artist. Prince wouldn't let his music be used in just any film, regardless of who was asking or how much money was being offered. The music wasn't for sale. It wasn't for licensing. It wasn't raw material to be deployed for someone else's narrative. It wasn't raw material to be cut and edited and used to serve someone else's artistic vision for a documentary project. The estate's response reflected a principle that Prince had fought for his entire life. The principle that artists own their work and control how it's used. Prince would have approved of this decision. Now, let's fast forward to 2026. Prince's estate has been making strategic moves to manage his legacy in thoughtful and careful ways. In late March 2026, they announced an expanded edition of Parade, the album he released in 1986, one of his most beloved works. 40 years later, they're bringing it back with new material and expanded packaging and restored sound quality for a contemporary audience. The timing is deliberate. The anniversary creates a natural moment for reissue. It keeps Prince relevant. It introduces new generations to his work. It allows longtime fans to experience the album in new ways with previously unreleased material and expanded liner notes that provide context and insight into his vision. Even more significantly, in January 2026, the estate released reissued versions of Hit and Run Phase 1 and Hit and Run Phase 2 for the first time on vinyl. These albums hadn't been available in that premium format before in physical form. For the first time, fans could own physical copies of these albums in a format that collectors and audiophiles truly appreciate for sound quality and tactile experience. The reissues include deluxe editions with 2-disc CDs, 3-disc vinyl sets, remastered tracks using modern technology, and B-sides that provide deeper insight into Prince's creative process. This is a comprehensive, careful approach to bringing Prince's work back into circulation while maintaining its integrity and Prince's vision for how his music should be experienced. This is legacy management done right. What's happening here is a shift in estate strategy that's fundamentally different from how other artists' estates operate. Prince's estate is executing a long-term plan for his catalog that respects his wishes. They're spacing out reissues strategically. They're maintaining scarcity while also making work available. They're controlling the narrative about Prince's legacy with precision and intention. They understand that Prince's estate is built on control, not access. That's the way he would have wanted it. The irony is that by refusing to let Prince's music be used for just any project, by maintaining his standards even after death, the estate is actually honoring Prince more than they could by monetizing every available opportunity. They're saying, Prince's principles matter. Prince's choices matter. Prince's artistic vision matters more than the money we could make. This is how you preserve a legacy. This is how you ensure that an artist's memory remains intact and uncorrupted. The Melania documentary refusal was a small decision, but it reveals everything about how the estate understands its role as steward of Prince's work. The contrast between Prince and other artists' legacies is stark. When we look at estates that license music aggressively, that put the artist's name and image on every possible product, that allow their music to be used in contexts the artist would have rejected, we see the difference. Prince's estate chose differently. They chose to be protective. They chose to say no. They chose to honor what Prince fought for his entire life: autonomy, control, and artistic integrity. This is why Prince's legacy will endure. Not because of the reissues, not because of the vault releases that may come in the future, but because Prince controlled his own narrative, even after death. The estate respects that control. That's the ultimate form of respect an estate can show an artist. That's Prince's greatest victory. Prince's commitment to control extended even to small details that others might ignore. He cared about how his image appeared. He cared about the context in which his music was heard. He cared about every aspect of how he was presented to the world. This wasn't vanity. This was professionalism. This was an artist taking responsibility for how his work was experienced. The estate understands this about Prince. They know that Prince would never have approved of his music being used to promote a political candidate, especially not in a controversial documentary. The refusal to license the music isn't about judgment. It's about respect for Prince's principles and his way of operating. In fact, the refusal might be one of the best decisions the estate could have made for Prince's legacy. It demonstrates that Prince's values are still relevant, still respected, still honored. It shows that Prince's influence extends beyond his music into how he's remembered and treated after his death. It's a reminder to the world that artists have agency over their work, even after they're gone. The Melania documentary will have music from other artists. Prince's music simply won't be part of it. And that's exactly how Prince would have wanted it. The estate made the right call. Prince spent his entire career fighting for artists' rights. He fought against record companies. He fought against streaming services. He fought against unauthorized use of his work. He understood that if you give up control over your music, you lose ownership of your legacy. The music becomes a tool for others to use. The music becomes a commodity. The music loses its artistic purity. Prince refused to let that happen during his lifetime. The estate refuses to let that happen after his death. This is consistency. This is principle. This is legacy management done with integrity and purpose. Looking at the March 2026 announcement of the Parade reissue and the January 2026 reissues of Hit and Run, it's clear that the estate has a plan. They're introducing Prince to new generations. They're expanding access to his catalog in controlled ways. They're releasing material that Prince approved or that fits with his vision. But they're doing it on Prince's terms. They're refusing to commodify his image or his music for commercial purposes that Prince would have rejected. They're maintaining standards. They're protecting his legacy. They're honoring what made Prince great, his uncompromising commitment to excellence and control.